Hi everyone, welcome to the first online lecture for week one. The purpose of this overview is just to give you a little bit of a background of what the systems approach is, along with reviewing the objectives for the course. As you can see, the objectives for the course are listed in front of you. We're going to take a look at the Dick and Carey model, which you should be reading about now in your course text. The Dick and Carey model is real similar to the ADDIE model, which sort of encompasses everything that we do, in which you want to analyze the instruction or what you're trying to do, design, develop, implement, and evaluate the instructional piece. We'll spend some time describing the tasks associated with each step in the Dick and Carey model, specifically the input and output materials. Then we'll spend a substantial amount of time looking at the learning theories that sort of serve as the foundation for the Dick and Carey model, and that's pretty much the main focus. I wanted to just give you a definition of instructional technology and design, and the big name there, or the big thing that you should know, is the whole idea of the systematic approach. Everything we do in this course will be systematic, planned, and structured. There's very little flying by the seat of your pants in this type of design, as you'll see as we progress. I thought it might be a good idea just to give you a definition of what it means to learn, and what instruction is. Learning, there's many definitions of what learning is, like slight variations, all saying the similar thing. But learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior due to experience. Relatively permanent change in behavior due to experience. So what's instruction? Well, Gagnier says instruction is a planned set of events that affects learners in such a way that learning is achieved. So the instructional design that we'll be getting into will ultimately impact what the learner can or can't do. So then, what's a system? A system is technically a set of interrelated parts, all of which work together towards a different goal. So if we're looking at the educational system, we have to look at all the parts to see how it comes together to make it work as a whole. Consider maybe the engine in your car, or a car mechanic. The mechanic who fixes my car knows a lot about the system of the engine. Now, if one aspect of the engine isn't working right, that could affect the system as a whole. So with instruction, we want to make sure that all the entire system is working effectively, ideally, to provide the best instruction. So why the system approach? Well, there is research to support it, which you're going to be reading into. You'll see that there is a lot out there that supports the use of learning outcomes, or learning target, essential questions. You want to lay out what the student should know, and then design instruction and assessments around that. The systems approach aids learner in focusing on learning outcomes, or what the learners are supposed to do at the completion of the instruction. It should also help things become more efficient, in that you're not flying by the seat of your pants, like I said before. A quality system designed approach has input and output that all interrelates and helps guide the design process. And then ideally, the process in the systems approach is empirical, which means that you should have some sort of data-based results, and you can make data-based decisions, which will also allow the material to be replicated. So that concludes the first little overview on just the objectives and what the systems approach is. The next video will be getting into a little more depth on design and theory. Basically, what I'd like to get into today are some of the behavioral theories that are out there, some constructivist points of view, which are inquiry-based, and then some cognitive strategies that are more directed. So what these three parts will do are look at the behavioral, cognitivist, and constructivist points of view. I want to start off by doing a little cognitive demonstration with you with memory. And it's going to be pretty easy. It's simply going to involve you reading a list of words for 30 seconds. And as you read the words for 30 seconds, I'd like you to try to memorize as many as you can. When the 30 seconds is up, I will have you pause the video and write down as many as you can recall. So, as a recap, you're going to be seeing a list of words to test your memory here, cognitive process. And after 30 seconds of memorizing the words, you will write down as many as you can recall without looking at the list. So here we go. Ready? Stop. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is write down as many as you can recall. Go ahead, pause the video, and just on your piece of paper, write down as many as you can recall, and count up how many you got. Now, what the research has shown on this is that the most commonly remembered words there are ruler, house, blue, and Disney World. And there's a reason why those are remembered based on some cognitive principles. Ruler, if you put that down, 80% of people tend to recall that because it's repetitive. You've seen it on the list more than once, and you just will be able to pull that up quicker and easier because it's you've thought about it more than one time. House was the second most remembered one. Well, actually, at 85% more than that. And house is based on the idea of recency. It was the last word on the list. Blue, you might have recalled blue because of the idea of primacy, meaning that it was the first thing on the list. And when we want to remember something, we often remember the first and last items on the list and often forget the middle items. We call that the serial position effect. And then emotion, if it evokes an emotional memory, then you're more likely to recall the information. So, for instance, the word Disney World might invoke a family trip or a memory of Disney, and it has meaning to you. So it's kind of interesting in how it works with how memory is processed. In regards to attention span, typically our short-term memory can handle about 5 to 7 bits of information. We call that the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. Some people can retain more, some people a little less, but the magical number is usually around 7. When it comes to attention span, the average student's attention span is somewhere between 5 to 8 seconds, with the maximum attention span probably around 30 at most. So when we're designing instruction, you need to take in mind or keep in mind what people can handle. So let's try that memory task again. Let's do it one more time, but this time with a slight variation. I'm going to show a list again of words. I would like you to try to memorize these words for 30 seconds. When 30 seconds is up, I will stop you, and you will write down as many as you can recall. Please don't have that original list handy, just set it aside. You don't need to look at it for this one. Okay, so let's try it again. Slight variation. Here we go. Ready? Stop. Now go ahead and write down as many as you can recall. Go ahead, pause the video, and then count up how you did. So let's do it one more time. I know you're thinking, well, what are we trying to do here? Go ahead and now cover up that list. Look at it. Don't look at it. Excuse me. And I'm going to show you the same list again, and I want you to see if you can recall as many as possible. So the same idea. Let's try it again. Ready? Stop. Okay. Now take a look at the list you have. Go ahead, pause me for a second, pause the video, and see how you did. Count up how many you got correct. Now, I'm guessing that you probably did better on the this last list compared to the first or second one, and maybe we can tie in some cognitive strategies to explain that. First off, you'll notice that the first or the second list that we looked at, the one with the shoe and South Carolina, North Carolina, those are broken down into chunks, and that's going to impact how you can recall it. You might have associated certain names with certain colors or states. And you also have to counter in the idea or factor in the idea that repetition plays a role. Seeing it a second time is going to make a difference in many cases. So when we're designing instruction, repetition is a memory strategy that is effective. So in this case, we were able to tie in some cognitive strategies to help you recall the list there. So cognitive strategy plays a huge part in instructional design. Another big area of instructional design, another theory, another foundational theory, would be that of behavioralism. And when people think of behavioralism, we often put that together with B.F. Skinner, which is probably a good name to know. And when it comes to learning and behavioralism, it's all about the relationship between the stimulus and a response. And if we're going to have learning occur, you typically are going to have some sort of reinforcement. And you can shape behavior through the positive or negative reinforcement that you provide, such as a gold star or a pat on the back for a student. When it comes to instruction, one big thing that comes to mind for me, and there's a picture of that on your screen, is the programmed instruction movement that took place in the 50s and 60s. And what you see there is a teaching machine. Basically, students were taught through this machine, one small step at a time that you could probably not even get wrong. And as you go through these steps, you learn more and more material at your own pace. And if you make a mistake, you remediate and do it until you get it right. So the programmed instruction movement was one thing that came as a result of Skinner's theory on behavioralism. So that concludes this part one video. Part two will go into a little bit more on constructivist theory and on cognitive thought. Hi everyone, and welcome to part two of our week one online lecture over chapter one. What we're going to do is continue looking at a few theories on instructional design and how we learn. And the first one we're going to start off with is based on Robert Gagné. You might have been exposed to him in your educational practice as a cognitive behavioralist. He was looking at the conditions of how we learn. And pretty much he discussed the conditions for learning and his 9 events of instruction, not evens, excuse me, sorry about that, 9 events of instruction are guiding practice in many cases today. I'm not going to read through the whole list to you because you can check those out. But if you do anything with, like, for instance, having a hook in your lesson plan or design, I mean, I think you could probably give that credit going back to Gagné. This 9 events of instruction model is influenced heavily the UBD model, or understanding by design, that the two guys, Wiggins and Teague, have put out. And I've also got a video that I'd like you to check out, which is on the Moodle page, that just has a little bit on the 9 events of instruction. The next thing I think we should move into is the idea of alignment. And if we're talking about instructional strategies, I think you have to understand here what I mean by alignment. Align means that your goals and objectives can't be all over the place. What you design should be measurable. The activities, the assessment should go back to the key objectives that you lay out in the beginning of the instructional process. This will keep things structured and flowing properly. When we talk about different theories of learning, one cognitive strategy or theory involves memory. Memory is a huge part of this. And the Atkinson and Shiffrin model is a big one, and as you see in the diagram there, it's the model of how we encode, store, and retrieve information. That information first has to come in from the outside world to our sensory memory, which is extremely limited. That sensory input that we get gets funneled down into what we call our working memory or short-term memory. Working memory is a little more contemporary term. And what has to happen is that you need to use the information or you lose it. And as I mentioned in the previous session, you can only handle about 5 to 7 bits of information for a short period of time. So when we're talking about memory, and if you want to get things encoded to long-term storage, then you've really got to do something in that encoding process. So the instructional designer needs to understand how, for instance, in this case, the Atkinson and Shiffrin model work. If we want to have the kid retain the information, it has to be encoded. If you wanted to make it stick, you got to do something to make that happen. The cognitive load theory, John Sweller is the name that you associate with this, talks about the limits of our working memory. And when it comes to limits, we mentioned the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. And you gotta think about, maybe let me give you an example of how this works. If you're trying to cram for an exam at the last minute, you're gonna hit a point where you have a cognitive overload. You can't keep just cramming the information in. You're gonna stop. It's just not gonna go in anymore. And so Sweller talks about how much you can handle, students can handle, the learner can handle, and he writes of the intrinsic load, extraneous load, and germane load in his work. You just can't overdo it. When it comes to behavioralism plays a big role, and you see this in probably in your daily instruction with how you reinforce material. Whether you're providing positive reinforcements to your children, it might just be a stamp on a paper or words of encouragement. There's elements of retention. You have to have the take the learning and be able to transfer it, or the student does, to a real world context. And then we also, when it comes to behavioralism, look at learner performance. That's where the learning objectives and the performance standards come into play for what we're going to do. From a constructivist standpoint, one early name from the 20s stands out in my mind, and that's John Dewey. John Dewey says that learning was shaped, or is shaped, by individual experience, and that learning occurs through real-world applications and hands-on learning. So this constructivist approach, you want to learn through, or learning would be a social experience. And so when we're doing problem-based, problem-focused type tasks, you could stem back and consider that there. Social cognitive theory. Albert Bandura is the name that comes to mind, and if you ever took a psychology class, maybe you've studied the Bobo doll experiments and observational learning. But in the context for what we need to look at it basically Bandura says that learning results from the interaction from behaviors that the child knows, through the results of interaction, through what they see in the environment, through what they see other children do, the modeling, through what the adults may do. And the big idea, though, is that they're going to pick up and learn based on the interactions they have with the environment. Bandura also writes of the idea of self-efficacy, or this idea of the level of confidence the child has in what they do. And from a teacher standpoint, from a design standpoint, I guess you could probably tie in the idea of scaffolding. You want to be able to scaffold the information and build it up for the student to learn so that they do build the confidence. When you think of scaffolding, for me, it reminds me of Lev Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development. The way I understand, and the way I relate to zone of proximal development, is that when you're designing instruction, you want to make the instruction challenging for the learner, but not so challenging that they're frustrated with it and they can't grasp it. But then on the same hand, it can't be too easy to where there's no challenge at all. So you want to scaffold, you want to find the right level, which could be a challenge, but that also comes back to the idea that of when you're designing instruction, you want to conduct a learner analysis, and you'll know the needs of your learner and what they can and can't do. So Vygotsky, in the zone of proximal development, the whole idea of scaffolding, and adults can provide scaffolds to help that student learn. Jerome Bruner is another constructivist theorist. Basically says that cognitive growth is through interaction with the environment. We learn best through discovery. And a young child, kind of going with Piaget's idea of cognitive development, is going to learn through exposure in the world, developing schemas and accommodating those schemas to the new experiences they have. So you learn through experimentation, through interaction, through trial and error, and growth is just a part of this cognitive process of discovering things, the world around you. And so as the designer, you want to provide opportunities for the child to be exposed in whatever it is we're designing. Intelligence also plays a role, or theories of intelligence also play a role in instructional design. And one name in the field of education that often comes up is Howard Gardner, and he proposes 9 types of intelligence, as you see there. And when designing instruction and when we're conducting our learner analysis, we should be aware that different people come to the table with different strengths. And when we're talking about intelligence, there are several types. Gardner's big in this field. When you're designing instruction for yourself, for instance, you probably design things that are interesting to you or relevant to your learning, but you got to keep in mind that your instruction that you're designing for others may not be suited the way you like doing it, may not be best for the students. So understanding the learner and and how their intelligence plays into the mix is important and relevant. Gardner also, I just wanted to point this out, describes the entry windows, and this helps the instructional designer tailor the experience to the learner that they're designing the instruction for. So just as a quick recap, from the cognitive point of view, implications for instructional systems designs, you want to provide practice. That repetition, that rehearsal, that practice is all a part of the learning process. You gotta introduce it again, see it again, review it the next day. There needs to be some sort of active learning. Students should be involved, make the material meaningful to them, make it relevant to them. There needs to be some sort of individualization. And then you want to design things that will stick into long-term storage. And then from the constructivist point of view, you got to understand that analysis can't be done independent of the context, and goals have to be aligned with each other. Each field, depending on what area we're talking about, may have its own way of thinking, which needs to be considered. And then there is no universal evaluation when you start getting into real-world applications and problem-based learning. It's different practices have different evaluations and different ways of looking at it. So that concludes part 2 of this online lecture. Part 3 will pick up in just a minute.